skinning fields, flayed alive in the name of justice. Beyond the city walls, where the gallows swayed and the air stank of death, there stretched a place the villagers dared not linger. The skinning fields. It was a broad expanse of dirt and broken ground, where no crops grew and no birds sang. The earth there had been blackened by blood and rot, hardened by centuries of cruelty. And upon the wooden frames and the stone walls surrounding it, the skins of men fluttered like banners in the wind. Here justice was displayed in its most grotesque form. For thieves, rebels, heretics, and traitors, the punishment was not swift execution but the slow peeling away of their very flesh. Stripped of their skin, they were displayed for all to see. A warning etched not in parchment but in the very bodies of the condemned. The practice had begun with kings and lords who sought to make examples of those who defied their rule. A thief hanged was soon forgotten, but a thief skinned and nailed upon the city gate became a legend of fear. The sight of a man's hide stretched taut, his empty eyes and slack jaw staring blankly, made even the boldest think twice before defying the crown. The process itself was as much spectacle as punishment. At dawn, the condemned were dragged from dungeons reeking of piss and mildew. Shackled and broken, they were paraded through the streets, jeered at by crowds whose hunger for blood was never sated. Children perched on their fathers' shoulders to glimpse the spectacle. Women covered their mouths in mock horror, while their eyes glittered with cruel fascination. At the edge of the fields, the scaffolds waited. The condemned were bound to wooden frames, their arms and legs pulled taut with ropes, their mouths gagged to muffle the screams. Executioners stood ready with knives honed to razor sharpness, their hands steady from years of practice. They wore leather aprons slick with stains, their boots caked with gore, their faces hidden behind hoods that reeked of sweat and smoke. The flaying began at the feet, the knife slicing delicately between skin and flesh, peeling it back in long ribbons. The condemned writhed in agony, muffled shrieks filling the air, their eyes bulging with terror as their own bodies betrayed them. Blood ran freely, darkening the soil, pooling beneath the scaffold. The skin was worked slowly, inch by inch, torn from legs, torso, arms, until the body was no longer recognizable as human but a red, glistening mass of quivering muscle. The air filled with the stench of iron and rot, flies buzzing eagerly, drawn to the feast of fresh gore. Dogs barked from the edges of the crowd, their teeth bared, saliva dripping as they strained against leashes. Children laughed, mimicking the muffled cries, while priests muttered prayers that justice had been done. Once the condemned had breathed their last, their skins were treated with salt and pitch, stretched wide across wooden frames, then nailed to gates, towers, and walls. Some were hung like banners from gallows, their faces still intact, mouths forever frozen in silent screams. The rest of the body was discarded into pits, gnawed by rats, or hacked apart for the flesh market. The fields became a forest of horror. Dozens of skins, hardened by sun and rain, cracked and curled with age, hung side by side. Some were fresh, dripping with blood that stained the soil. Others were withered, blackened, and brittle, their features barely recognizable. When the wind blew, they rattled against their frames like grotesque wind chimes, whispering with the sound of torn parchment. Travelers who approached the city often turned pale at the sight, crossing themselves, whispering prayers, or turning back entirely. The skinning fields had become more than punishment. They were a spectacle, a living monument to cruelty, and a place where death itself seemed to linger, thick and suffocating. There were stories told of the skins themselves. Some swore they moved in the night, twitching in the torchlight, lips curling as if to whisper curses. Others claimed to see eyes blink, hollow sockets weeping black tears. In storms, when lightning split the sky, The fields seemed alive, the skins writhing on their frames, straining against their nails as though trying to return to the bodies they had lost. Even the guards who patrolled the fields confessed to unease. More than one was found hanged from the scaffolds, their skin peeled in mockery of the justice they enforced. Whether by human hands or something darker, no one dared ask. Over time, the fields grew, stretching further as executions multiplied. Rebels filled the scaffolds after failed uprisings, their skins nailed in long rows like trophies. Heretics burned at the stake were flayed before the flames consumed them, their hides nailed upon church doors to remind the faithful of the price of doubt. Thieves, liars, adulterers, all found themselves feeding the ever-hungry earth of the fields. The smell became unbearable. Even miles away, travelers could taste the sour, metallic stench on the air. In summer, the skins rotted quickly, bloating and splitting, spilling pus and maggots onto the soil. In winter, they froze solid, cracking with frost, pale as wax. Ravens perched upon them, tearing at scraps of flesh, their beaks clicking against bone. Yet still the executions continued. Still the fields grew. At night few dared approach. Those who did told of voices carried on the wind, whispers of agony, curses spoken in tongues no priest could decipher. Some claimed to see pale figures wandering between the scaffolds, their skinless bodies glistening, their hollow eyes staring with endless hate. Torches would flicker and die, leaving intruders in pitch darkness as unseen hands brushed against their faces, cold and damp as fresh flesh. The people learned to fear the fields as much as they obeyed them. Parents frightened children into obedience with warnings. Disobey, and you will hang flayed upon the tree. Lovers whispered of it in secret, imagining the cold horror of their skins nailed side by side for eternity. Even the nobility walked softly past the fields, unable to ignore the grotesque reminder of what waited should they fall from grace. But justice is a hungry beast, and the fields were never empty. The condemned came in endless supply, their skins joining the macabre tapestry of fear. The earth drank deeply of their blood, and the tree roots twisted through the soil as though feeding upon it, curling upward like hands clawing from graves. Centuries passed, and still the fields endured. Skins rotted, fell, and were replaced. Generations came and went, but the sight of the fields remained the same. A landscape of horror, a forest of the flayed, a monument not to justice but to cruelty. And when the wind blew through the skinning fields, it carried with it the eternal sound of suffering. The faint crack of stretched flesh, the sighs of the condemned, the endless whisper of death's cruel harvest. The fields were not forgotten. They were eternal.